Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for the Untangle community webinar. Today we'll be showing our brand new release, version 11.2 of our NG firewall solution. My name is Shannon Miles and I'm part of the product marketing team here and I'll be your host today. I have with us Dirk Morris, our co-founder and VP of products, who will be presenting and demonstrating the new features in version 11.2. So just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. If you have any audio issues, please just make sure you have selected the correct audio panel or the select preference in the audio panel. If you have selected to use a phone, you will need to dial in and use the access code provided. This webinar is being recorded, so you will have the option to rewatch it or revisit areas that you may need to follow up on, and you can also share with your colleagues that weren't able to join today. We'll be answering questions throughout the presentation, so please just submit them in the Q&A box and we'll get to those. And with that, let's get started.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining. We're really excited to be showing off some of the new stuff in 11.2. As always, please ask as many questions as you can in the chat box and we will respond to as many as we can. We have a lot to cover today, so I'm not sure how many we'll get to, but we have a couple people answering questions, so if you have any questions, type them in, and Amy or Shannon, please interrupt me if you have questions that we should cover. So there's some major changes in 11.2. We're going to go into some of them and show them off. 11.2, the new reporting engine and a brand new intrusion prevention application, and a whole bunch of other features. As always, you can review these yourself by going to wiki.untangle.com, clicking on changelog, and clicking on the 11.2 changelog. Before I jump right into 11.2, let me tackle the number one question. We push out upgrades over time, so if you have an existing Untangle box, you will not have 11.2 available yet to it probably. We push out upgrades over time, so sometime in the coming weeks you'll have the upgrade available. If you want it now, you can contact us at support@untangle.com. We can get it to you, or you can do a new install or whatever. So let me jump right into reports. Reports have been completely redesigned from the top down. Really happy with them. I think people will really love them. Before I get into the differences of the new reports, let me show you how to get to them. In the reports application, the old reports used to just click view reports. Now there's view reports and view old reports. So the old reports are still there. They're completely untouched. If you love the old reports, that's great. They're still there. They may be removed in the future. So the new reports are the view reports button. Alternatively, now you can just go to the drop down at the top and say show reports, and reports are embedded within each application. So if I go to web filter and I click on reports tab where it used to be the event log, I can now see the reports for web filter inside web filter, and that's true for all the apps. So the reports are now much more integrated with the administration interface and accessibly with reporting users as a standalone.
Are you sharing your screen?
Can everybody see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay,
Right.
hopefully you can hear me and see my screen. That
Yeah.
will improve the demo greatly. So let me dig into the new reports. The new reports are completely dynamic. That means as you're viewing them, they're actually querying the database behind the scene and producing the data that you're requesting. So unlike the old reports, which kind of goes through every night at 2 a.m. and generates some graphic files, the new ones are completely dynamic. That has some great advantages, is it now allows you to request different types of data and change it in ways that you want to see it. So the thing we focused on was really allowing the ability to drill down on any aspect of the data. So let me show what we mean by drilling down. So let's say we go back to web filter. So actually, let me go into the show reports so you'll see all the reports, and then click on web filter. On the left-hand side, you have a whole bunch of built-in reports. These are ones that we've already written that are commonly useful. This one just shows web usage over the last 24 hours. You can kind of, this was last night when people were out of this office. You can see when people come in the office and web usage goes up. Don't see a lot of violations or blocked or anything. nothing alarming. And each one of these shows something different. So if I go to top categories for requests, over the same time period, it'll show what kind of sites are being visited: technology, content, servers, marketing, ads, whatever. So each one of these shows something different. The old event logs is in the select events down here. So if you just want to go and actually see the different events, you can click on these, and that was what the old event logs were. And those have changed a little bit as well, and I'll go into those. Over here on the right panel, you're going to see the data that's used to generate this graph. So over here, you can click export and download the data as an Excel file. And each one obviously shows completely different data. So if I go to top flagged sites, which only has 6 hits, Playboy, you can see the data for that. If I go to top sites by request, or let me do size instead. It looks like Windows Update is by far our largest website, which makes sense. You can see all the data here, and you can scroll down and you can export that to your own machine. Along the top up here is a bunch of basically ways to customize what you're looking at. So this is done as a bar chart. You can also view it as an area chart. You can also view it as a line chart, all sorts of different bars. So really it's up to you how you want to view this data. And additionally, you can go down here to the bottom and change the date. So right now I'm looking at, let me switch back to bar 3D. Let's say I wanted to look at midnight to midnight instead. This would be yesterday, midnight from midnight. So obviously you can see people aren't using the internet in the morning or late at night in the office. And here's what it looks like. So now I can switch through all these categories and this all stays the same. So top domains by request, this is during yesterday from midnight to midnight. So when I said drill down, which is one of the key features, it allows you to say, well, this is all interesting. This is a great overview of what kind of web traffic is going on my network in regards to web filter. I want to drill down more specifically on a time or a specific user or a specific domain. So let's go to top host names. So here's all the different hosts on this network that were browsing the network or using the internet between midnight and midnight yesterday. Whole bunch of different machines. I want to drill down on one of those machines. Let's say I want to pick on this guy right here. There's a bunch of ways down here in this conditions thing where I can limit the data that I'm seeing to a specific condition. So one easy way to do that would be to go to host name. I say I want to quick add a condition where host name equals dmorris Linux. So now when I've done that, all of a sudden the top host name is dmorris Linux. Well, that's because all the data is being filtered where I'm only looking at data now where host name equals this in the database. So let's say I scroll back up to web usage. Well, now it looks completely different. This is yesterday's because this is just web traffic for this one host. So this is true of everything. You can actually go through in the database and you can filter, I want to only look at one web filtering category, or I want to look at only one domain. In fact, let's go to top domains. This is top domains for this specific host yesterday. So you got a huge list of all sorts of websites that are going to, looks mostly work related. So there's some Reddit in there. Let's say I wanted to look more specifically at that. So obviously this guy's wasting some time doing some non-work stuff at work, going to Reddit. There's this little funnel over here which I can click to actually easily add another condition. And now I have 2 conditions down here. I want to only look at web traffic where this is the host and this is the domain. And then I go back to web usage all and I see even less stuff and I can see, okay, this person visited Reddit at 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. a couple times. Maybe I wanted to get more information specifically on those. I can always click view events and actually see those specific events that were used to generate that data. So here you can see, oops, Reddit, visiting different subreddits, NetSec, / looks like just a bunch of, just kind of browsing around looking at things. I can remove a condition like this, and then all of a sudden I'm getting all the data for that host again, but only for that host because now I have one condition. So using this, and this works, I'm demoing web filter specifically, but all of the applications are like this. So if I went over to application control. Now this condition's still down there. This is looking at application controls report for this one specific user. I can go to top applications, and mostly this machine is just using HTTP, it looks like, nothing fancy. But I can get rid of this, and then again, that would be the report for my entire network because I got rid of the condition. You can see Google Hangouts, Windows updates, YouTube, all sorts of stuff. So drill down really gives you the power to dig into the data more specifically. You can always view the data one by one. You can export it to your own machine. So there's a lot of we've worked on giving you more visibility by drilling down on certain aspects. The database schema underneath that's driving all this data is documented in the wiki now. So if I click here, you'll see there's tons of columns that I can sort by. I could say, well, I only want to look at things that were prioritized by bandwidth control this way, or things from a certain server to a certain server, or certain usernames, or maybe a certain policy. Sometimes people want to have different reports for a given policy. Say, I only want to look at reports for the student rack instead of everybody. You can do that now by just adding a condition. Since everything's generated dynamically, you can just tune it to get exactly the data that you want. Let me switch back real quick to, I covered that. Oh, so also you can completely create custom report entries as you want. So what I demoed was some existing ones over here. You know, each application has existing reports. So, you know, if I click on bandwidth control, here's the bandwidth usage for the network yesterday. And by the way, on these I can click on the key and hide and show different aspects. Let's say I specifically wanted to always see, I mean, obviously if I wanted to investigate a specific host or a specific policy or whatever, I could add a condition down here. But let's say I always wanted to see a specific report entry about a specific host. You can go into reports under manage reports, and you can see each and every report entry, so to speak, and you can add your own. I won't go too much in depth into this because it's actually fairly involved. But if you want to say, the one we were playing with a lot was web usage all. I can't edit that one because it's actually one of the built-in ones, but I can create my own copy, and then I can tune all the different settings that are used to create that report entry. So that's useful for people who always wanted to say, well, I really care about this one specific problem user or this, you know, one specific aspect, or really whatever you want to see, you can add and create your custom report entry to show exactly that. Obviously all the charts are now interactive. They're all done in JavaScript. This gives us a lot more powerful things to work with because it's dynamic. So let me go back to, say, the web filter report. Well, this is useful. This is a different network I'm looking at now. You can see there's some flagged things on this network. Let's say I wanted to get more info on that. I can click on the scan to hide that essentially, and now I can just see flagged. Or if I wanted to say let's say top sites, but I wanted to ignore a couple. Well, you can click on the key and hide the different columns that you care about. So having it done in JavaScript and be interactive gives you a lot of power to really drill into the data, because a lot of times you'll go, let me see, top categories by request. I don't really care about content servers. That doesn't really tell me much. That just means it's downloading from some content distribution network. So I can hide that, and that's a more accurate view of what was going on this network yesterday. Online shopping, technology, search engines. To run through a specific example, let me say, let's drill down as there were some top flagged host names, which is basically who was doing that was, we saw some violations back here on the web usage all. Here we can go to see, okay, here were the people doing the violations. You can click to either add a condition to drill down on one of them, or you can click here to do this, drill down on that specific aspect and see what that specific user is doing. So it's all about drilling down to get to the data that you want. Event logs have changed a little bit, so now they're actually combined under the, let me go back to, say, let's pick a different app. I've shown web filter a bit too much. application control. It's a good example. Let's go to reports here. So now event logs are hidden under the reports. So it's down here, there's report entries and event log entries. Previously there used to be event log tab, but now all the different event logs are shown under here. This is an application control event log, so you can see in real time kind of what looks like BitTorrent running on this network currently. You can see in real time what sessions are going. There's some new features about it. You can go to the drop downs and you can hide and show certain columns. So it used to just be you saw what you saw and you couldn't add all the columns. There's actually tons more information in the database. If you want to see all that information now, you can actually add it. So you can click here and see every little bit of information you want. So hopefully that'll make it a lot easier. Again, you can always filter, and by the way, the conditions apply here as well. So previously it was you can do the filtering on the client side and look at the 1,000 events that are showing in your browser, or you can just say, well, I'm only interested in a specific condition where, say, hostname equals this, or a certain policy, or a certain client. And then you're only going to see that looks like all this machine's done is DNS, so nothing very interesting. So the event logs now also allow you to drill in and see a lot more data with the column drop down, and again, you can group and filter and all that kind of things that you could in the host viewer all along. Some big improvements behind the scenes. The way the database is structured changed a little bit. The great thing about this is for you guys who like to store data for a long time, you can now store up to a year of data. Obviously, you have to have hard drive space to do so, but it used to be limited to, I think, 60 or something, 60 days. And the problem was when you did that, the bigger the database was, the worse the performance was of inserting new data into that database. Now you can basically put whatever you want. So 365 is currently the limit, so you can store up to a year. Another cool thing is bypass sessions are now stored in the database. So previously we had no visibility into bypass sessions. Bypass sessions basically means I don't want to scan this at the application layer. I don't want to scan it with the apps. So for example, sessions to and from the Untangle server itself are bypassed, or anything you bypass in bypass rules is bypassed. Now you have some visibility into bypass rules, or what's being bypassed, the sessions and how much data they're using and all that. So here you can go to sessions. This is the sessions on this network, and you can see here's the bypassed traffic, and you can dig into the actual sessions and say, well, I want to know what's bypassed. In this case, it's actually just all DNS lookups from the Untangle server itself, which is not scanned because it's from Untangle, the device itself. But anything would be that you put in our bypass rules would show up here. So this is a great tool for people who do bypass a lot of stuff to now see how much data that's using and what kind of stuff is being bypassed. Let me touch on the old reports are still in place. They'll likely be removed in 12.0. So if you love the old reports, just remember to turn off upgrades after you upgrade so that you won't be automatically upgraded to 12.0. There's a couple things we have to figure out, and then we'll probably remove the old reports, which means there will be no more nightly reporting task. Everything will be completely dynamic. You can view the reports whenever you want to view the reports, and the new ones will just be dropped in place. I see a lot of questions. Is there anything I should cover? That's a good question, actually. So if the conditions, if you add a condition, let me go back here, and the condition doesn't make sense for that specific table, it's basically just ignored. So let me say I want to go to show reports, and I'm looking at, I don't know, what's a better report I can pick? I'll just pick on one of these. So I want to look at, I don't think anything's flagged. Okay, there we had one user doing something, and I want to look at that one specific user, and I want to see what it was that was a violation, and then I can look at that specific user and look at all their traffic. And again, this is Zynga Gaming, which I guess was only one single session on this Android device, whoever this is, which I would have to look into. If I then click on WAN Balancer, and I look at the WAN balancer report, well, this user, I mean, looking at WAN balancer report for a specific user doesn't really make sense. WAN balancer is global, so to speak. It's about your WANs being up or down, or the same with WAN failover. So basically this is going to be ignored when I look at, say, WAN failover test events, because this column doesn't exist in this table. So hopefully that makes sense. Yes, there's a question about sending out emailing. We're really moving away from emailing reports. Emailing reports in PDF, it's cool, it's just old. It doesn't, since it's not dynamic, it can't really give you a very powerful reporting tool. It basically is just a summary. So we're really moving to a more dynamic, interactive reporting model that allows you to drill into it. And that, unfortunately, means moving away from email and PDF-based things. You can always go in and export your whole database if you want. There's really not a huge need for that because, well, you can store up to a year of data now anyway. But you're welcome to. You can set this, let's say I want to look at, a whole month of data. You can do that. This is a month, and now these bars are days if you look closely instead of hours. And then I could say I want to look at all those web events for the whole month, and then I want to export that.
We had a couple people asking for hardware recommendations and whether or not their hardware needs to change.
That's a great question. The question was whether or not your hardware requirements will change with this. Unlikely they will change. If you're running a huge network though, let's say you've got a college campus and you're sitting in front of a dorm and you got 20 kids running BitTorrent and 100 other kids browsing the internet and playing games, and you go in and you run a monthly report and web filter and start drilling into data and things, obviously that's running real queries against your database, so that will affect the performance of the machine, and that will create additional load. Now the database is highly indexed, so it'll probably be a lot less load than you would think, but it is putting additional load. So if your server's already really, really, really busy, right now on this server, the CPU load is low and the memory usage is like none, so I wouldn't anticipate this being a problem on this machine. But if your server's really busy, yeah, but I wouldn't go change your hardware just for fun. Oh, so there was a question when I showed the violation earlier about playboy.com. Let me go back to web filter and say, what was it, top block sites. Well, for one, let's just say I just wanted to easily see that. I could just click on view events and I can see specifically those 6 events. This is D. Morris laptop, but let's say more specifically I wanted to get black there, and I say, well, let's add a condition so we can see more information than just the events. Go back to web usage all, and now I'm only looking at entire web usage for this one domain. So this happened at 4 p.m. yesterday. I want to go see what the top clients, but again, that's the top clients for only that one domain. So here I can see exactly the client or the host name, same deal. So you can just add in the filters you want, add condition, or add in the conditions you want to drill down on that data, or you can just click on the view events. So you can pretty much see who did that at what time and all that. And by the way, the download thing just allows you to save this image file to your desktop. There's a question, does the new reporting still track traffic from the VPN? Yes, it does. You can exclude it if you want with conditions, which, by the way, I used equals, but there's all sorts of conditions you can use. Like I could say, I want to know everything except a domain, or everything for a specific user, or whatever. Or greater than. I only want to look at sites that were large. I don't know. Or username included this, or whatever. So there's a whole lot of conditions you can use. But you could only look. You could look at reports for where the client, let me say, is. This is a little bit more advanced. This, obviously, I just got an error. That's a good thing I should show. Click refresh. I got an error. Why is that? Well, client address equals playboy.com. That's not an IP address. So that's not valid syntax. So if you type in something invalid, you're going to get an error. So, but if I did something like then you're going to get an error. That doesn't make any sense. So 168. Just type in something random. There's no machine. I just made that up. But so you can say does not equal or does not equal. The client interface does not equal the VPN if you want to exclude those users, or you can put them in a different policy and exclude them by policy. You can kind of do whatever you want.
We are also hosting a specific webinar to this new reporting application next month that will be just dedicated to the reports, and Dirk will do an even deeper deep dive into all the possibilities and functionalities of that. So just wanted to let everyone know. We'll talk about that later at the end.
Yes, thank you. I just don't have time to go into every aspect. Like obviously, oops. If I click customize, going into each different aspect and all the different types of graphs and how you can customize them and changing colors and all that stuff, we don't have time necessarily for all that, how to create custom report entries and all that. But hopefully we can do a deeper dive in a future webinar. In the meantime, you can go to demo.untangle.com and play around with it, or you can give it a download, or you can just wait until the 11.2 is available on your machine and press upgrade, and you'll see all this new data. So unfortunately, there's more to it. I don't have time for everything, but let me keep moving just because there's a lot to cover. Intrusion prevention, we're really excited about this as well. Basically, the old intrusion prevention was great. It just had an older signature set, and it was only scanning certain things. What we did is basically go out there and find snort, and the newer snort signature set, and package that up as an application. So for those of you familiar with snort, it's an intrusion prevention open source application, and we take that with the VRT signature set, and on upgrade, your old intrusion prevention application will disappear and your new one will be installed. Well, you will need to install the new one. The benefits of the new one are basically that it's a clean snort install, and it's got literally like 35,000 signatures or something. So this one's already configured, but when you first install it, you'll have to go through a wizard that says, here's the kind of things I'm interested in scanning or catching. And then after that, it'll enable a certain rule set based on your amount of RAM, because with so many signatures, you probably don't want to enable them all unless you have enough RAM. So it'll come up with a suggested set of signatures, and then you basically turn it on and you're good to go. Let me log on to a different one. Oops. It's unfortunately in Japanese. Let me change it back into English. So let's see if there's anything interesting on this. So this is, well, lots of stuff detected by intrusion prevention on this network. So again, the reports are the same. This is detected and blocked. I am not blocking anything on this network, so everything should be, if I remove this, it should be no blocked. If I go down here to all events, I can see the specific events. TCP, port sweep, this is all just port scans, and SSH event proto mismatch, that's people connecting to an SSH server just trying random things. So this just looks like all reconnaissance type stuff, which makes sense because it's an attempted recon. This is pretty typical. If you have a public server, it's constantly going to get spammed with port scans and all sorts of stuff. Bad reset, that's not necessarily bad. That just means it was a bad reset, so something went wrong with that connection. That's a BitTorrent connection, I believe, based on the port, so that would make sense. And you can dig into the rules, top rules logged. You know, the bad resets we talked about, and then we've had a bunch of port scans and more port scans and more port scans and a bunch of SSH attempts. So I don't see anything alarming specifically in this case. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that got logged, but nothing too alarming. I could look at, well, who exactly was doing those things? Well, there's tons of different hosts. Some of these are on the local network, so maybe I want to only look at what that host did and go back to top rules. Port scan. So this was an outbound port scan, which is probably not a big worry. It just means it's open a lot of traffic to a lot of different ports at one time. I'm not going to go into each different category. There's tons of stuff in here. Each one you can open up. You can turn on log and block for a specific rule. This is an Apache mod cache denial of service attempt. So I could choose to block that. I would not block that unless you actually see it in your logs and it concerns you. I wouldn't just go do this. This is not going to be good for your network. I mean, you can do what you want, but I can click on edit and I can see the actual snort rule and edit as well, although I wouldn't advise that either. And back on the status page, you can see last check for updates and last updates. So we actually go through and grab the VRT signature set, and that is a publicly available from now Cisco, I believe, signature set with 30,000+ signatures or something. And we then put that on an update server, and your Intrusion Prevention app will automatically fetch it, download it, and add the new signatures into your rules if there are new signatures. So I think people will really love this new one compared to the old one, which didn't do a whole lot. Our hope is that it will provide value without causing problems on your network. That's always the challenge with intrusion prevention. I think we really figured it out in this case, and it's very promising. Yes, you can add your own rules. You can just go in there and click your own, add your own snort signature rule.
Yeah, performance.
Performance of, we've been very careful of intrusion prevention. There was a question of how does this intrusion prevention app affect your performance. We've been very, very careful to make sure it's performant and that it won't cause problems. That's our number one goal with intrusion prevention. Is we want it to add value, but moreover, we want it to not cause problems on your network. That's really a challenge with intrusion prevention. Most intrusion prevention systems and most people we talk to on the intrusion prevention signature are very enterprise focused, meaning they have dedicated administrators to tune these systems for performance, for false positives, all that. Small business customers don't have all day to sit there and tune and play with an intrusion prevention system. I think we found a solution that makes it very performant. We do a lot of performance tuning in the sense that, let's say you're 2 megabytes into a session on a web download. Well, we're not going to continue to scan that because if it was an attack, it would have already happened. So we do a lot of things that optimize the performance and say, okay, don't send this to the snort engine anymore for scanning because they're downloading an ISO file and it's got 10 more gigs. There's no reason to scan that. So I don't think you will have any issues with performance. Obviously, it's related to the amount of signatures that you enabled and the amount of RAM you have, but really other than the RAM that it takes up, it doesn't have a lot of impact on the machine resources. If you enable a lot of signatures, though, let's say you're only running 1 gig and you enable a big signature set, it's going to use a lot of RAM. So you need to be careful in that case because it could negatively impact your performance. The old intrusion prevention app didn't use a lot of RAM, but it didn't have a lot of signatures and didn't do a lot. So those are the kind of trade-offs that you get with the new intrusion prevention. Is there any way to enable, disable intrusion prevention en masse? You can enable the categories for logging through the wizard. You cannot at all enable an entire category to block. Sorry, I know that's what people want. We do not want to make that easy because it'll essentially just create havoc when people do that and then have constant problems. We may add it in the future, we may not. It's unlikely, to be honest. What I would do is go into your reports and say, oh look, I'm having an issue with this, go in and block it. How much RAM would you suggest if I did want, well, you don't want to enable all the signatures. If you go through, look, the question is how much RAM do I need to enable all the signatures? Some signatures, a lot of signatures actually are informational. You don't want to know when somebody's using Firefox. There's a signature for that kind of stuff, but it's not very interesting. The wizard will walk you through what we recommend. But not all of these are bad, so to speak. Some of them are just informational, so to speak. So depending on what they are, you don't just want to enable them all. Hypothetically speaking, if you wanted to enable them all, I think 2 gigs plus is plenty of RAM. I would just be very careful if you're on a low memory system and want to enable a large signature set. Are there any other questions on intrusion prevention? All right, I'm going to keep moving just because we're short on time here. I would encourage you just to get around and play with it, install it, run the wizard, see what it detects on your network, and then fine-tune it from there. We'd love your feedback on what you think. MAC addresses, a big new feature. People have always asked for this. We finally figured out, in my opinion, the correct way to do it. So let's say I want to go show host. You can also do that by clicking on the host thing up here, by the way, which is what I just did. This is going to show me the host on this network. So this is always here. The new thing is that the MAC address is now listed inside the host tab. So here's all the devices on this network right now and some information about them. And as always, some columns are hidden because we don't want to show everything. So you can go in and show all sorts of information about these different hosts. These 2 columns are new, MAC address and MAC vendor. MAC vendor is just pulled from a publicly available database of who owns that MAC address. So it's actually kind of useful because then you can say, oh, this is a Dell machine, this is an Apple machine, this is obviously an iPhone because you can tell by the host name and it's Apple and it's got this MAC address. So for people who always wanted to use MAC address instead of IP address, now you can go into rules and you can say, I want to add a rule where client MAC address is whatever. So that's a useful tool. The nice thing about it is, so usually MAC address is source MAC address. So if you've got a network that's more than one layer, MAC addresses do not persist through a router. So if you've got a wireless access point or something like that, MAC addresses don't always, or an inside router, MAC addresses don't ever persist through that. They definitely don't persist across the internet. This will use the client MAC address from the host table, which is looked up in the ARP table, which basically means if I know the MAC address for this, match on it. Otherwise, don't use the source MAC of the session or the packet because that's likely just to be the next router that sent you the packet. So it's a little bit smarter in the sense that it will actually use the MAC address of the client if it knows it. Otherwise, it's just that condition's never going to match. So you can do things like, add captive portal rules that bypass certain MAC addresses now and things like that. So hopefully that'll be a useful tool for people who love to use MAC addresses. It's also useful because now you can look at the MAC vendor and you can create rules based on the MAC vendor, by the way. You could also say if it's a Apple device, block it or bypass it or whatever. So it works just like other conditions and other rules. The 2 new conditions are source client MAC address and client MAC vendor, which is a string. All right, moving on real quick, couple captive portal improvements. There's now a cookie-based persistent login, which is really cool because basically if your users, if you use captive portal and they get tired of logging in again and again, there's now an ability to enable cookie-based authentication, which basically just stores a cookie in the browser and it's going to use that cookie to re-authenticate automatically the next time at the login page. So instead of having to type your login, it'll just re-authenticate you quickly. So that's a useful little tool to make your users happier. There's a new option to require the HTTPS cert on installation. For those of you who use HTTPS Inspector, this is a great little tool. You can actually go in and ask it to require the cert. What that means is it's going to test for the cert and says, oh, the cert doesn't look like it's installed on this machine. Install it first, please. And previously you could do check and it would show a warning. Now you can actually require it. So they can't actually log in until they install the cert. That may be useful for if you want to force HTTPS inspection. This would be a good way to push out the cert because people can't get to the internet unless they install the cert. Now obviously they could fake it. They can install the cert, log in, and then remove it. They can do a lot of things to get around it. But it's basically meant to be a tool to help you push out the cert by requiring people to install it so that you can do SSL inspection before they can get to the internet. There's a new option for requiring them to log in via HTTPS. I would caution you again, that's going to require the cert on all the machines because otherwise they're going to get a warning. So please don't enable this and then tell us you get a warning if they don't have the cert installed. We know that. You have to install the cert if you want HTTPS to work without a warning. The capture portal pages are now mobile friendly, so they're actually rescaled and all that for Android, iPhone, all those devices, and it actually looks much prettier. OpenVPN has a new installer for Chromebooks, which is really cool. The Chromebook has a custom format, so you can just import that and install it on your Chromebook. That's usually going to be used for full tunnel VPNs. If you have 100 Chromebooks that you send home with students or whatever, and you want them to be filtered at home, you can use this tool to push out OpenVPN to the Chromebooks. We also updated the OpenVPN Windows distribution. Webfool, thank you if you're on the webinar right now. As always, that helps with creating the OpenVPN distribution, keeping it up to date, and making sure it works on Windows 10 and all things like that. OpenVPN's events have now changed a little bit too. You'll see it when you get in the UI. It's actually a little bit cleaner and better. Sorry, I'm just going to keep on trucking. I know I'm moving fast. It's just a lot to cover. The JavaScript engine is completely new. Obviously, this was part of just staying on the current JavaScript system, but also part of the new graphs we needed to be on the new JavaScript engine. So far, it's great. I'm sure we'll find a couple issues here and there because whenever we change the JavaScript library, we find all sorts of new issues. But so far, it's looking really good. It's really a lot faster. In fact, if you go to the sessions, there's no sessions on that one. You pick a bigger network. This device only has 500 sessions. But if you click on sessions, you'll see how much faster it is. So as always, this was previously a little slower. Now you can do all this stuff and it's just lightning fast, which makes administration a lot more pleasant. There's now OVA files. If you go to untangle.com/get untangle, you can now download an OVA file, which is basically a VMware image. You can also install in VMware with the ISO or the image file, but the OVA just makes it a little bit easier to instantiate an image in VMware. If you just want to play around with it and poke at it, that'd be a good option. Those are now built automatically, so we'll be releasing those with every release going forward. Makes it much easier to do VM deployments. There's a new Windows installer for the cert. Basically, it's an exe file that sticks the cert in all the various locations. We did that just to make it easier to push out the cert to all your Windows machines. Download root certificate installer. And basically, it could be dangerous. Yeah. Basically, what it does is it installs it in the Windows OS cert database as well as Firefox and a couple other things, because it turns out some browsers use their own root store, so you have to actually install in those too. This utility just makes it a little bit easier. You can use this with a group policy object or whatever to push out the cert. New host event updates. This is really cool. This is totally worth showing. Go to the host table. As always, you see all the hosts on this network. Well, now there's actually events for what happens to that host table over time. You can see different stats about host table updates and so on. But you can more importantly look at the specific events for the host table. So here you can see all different events. This is when basically we set the HTTP user agent of this machine to this value at this time, which means we learned that it was using Mozilla Windows at this time. So you can go in and you can see, okay, we just now saw this address for the first time at this time. And we set the address for it, we set the MAC address, it's an iPhone. So this allows you to see devices coming and going on your network and what's happening with them. You'll see all sorts of metadata here. This client was issued a quota at this time, and the quota expiration was set at that date. So it's a really useful tool to tracking down. Let's say you need to investigate when a device came on your network or things like that. You can now go into there and do that and help debug all sorts of different things. Any informational change, well, except for a couple things, that happens to this will be in your host table updates event log. IPv6 filter rules have been added. Previously it was just a checkbox. I won't go too much into this, but under filter rules, you can now basically, there's a checkbox that says, hey, I want to enable this as an IPv6 rule. Obviously, don't go typing in an IPv4 address and then enable this. Basically, what that means is this filter rule is going to be both created on the IPv4 stack and the IPv6 stack, which are completely separate. So that'll give you fine-tuned ability to block and pass certain IPv6 traffic. IPsec tunnel traffic is now not bypassed by default. This is just a FYI, be aware that now when you do installs and you set up IPsec tunnels, that traffic will now go through all the other apps by default. You can bypass it just like always. It's just now it's going to be scanned by default. We did that so it's consistent, and it's probably the more anticipated behavior. It's just in the old days you weren't able to scan IPsec traffic at all. So now that's on by default. But that does allow you to, scan and block and control and shape and manage all your IPsec traffic just like you would any other traffic. Wireless interfaces, you can now view clients that are connected, a whole bunch of other wireless fixes and improvements. There was now a banner setting in the branding managers, allows you to display a message on the login page. That was a customer request. Quota attainment ratio is a new condition as well, in addition to MAC address conditions. Basically means I've attained this percentage of my quota. So a quota attainment of greater than 0.5 means I've already used half my quota. A quota attainment ratio of 1.5 or greater means I've already exceeded my quota by more than 50%. So basically that allows you to create rules where I say if you've gone over your quota and then use more, maybe I want to change the behavior after that. So let's say I go out of my quota, I exceed my quota, maybe we want to slow your traffic down. If I continue to use data and I exceed twice my quota, maybe I just want to outright block that traffic. So that allows you to craft rules like that. New application control signatures have been added, and Skype blocking works again, although that's a continual game of updating the signatures and them changing their thing to try to get around it. But right now it seems to actually block Skype. Admin settings. For those of you hardcore administrators, that's a cool thing. You can now go into administration reports, and you can actually, there's an event log for all settings changes. So you can see this is really kind of digs into under the covers of what Untangle's doing. You can see the changes of all the different things at the given time. So let's say I want to look at this whole month. This is all the settings changes for the whole month. Let's say I want to pick a specific change, click on this one. What changed? So I can click on the thing and I can say, okay, this was changed from initialized to running, means it turned application control light on. Somebody did that. Who was it? It was admin at this time. So that just allows you to go back and review your changes. Local admin basically means it was done by the Untangle appliance itself from the local host, which is actually quite common. So that's a cool little tool for those of you who want to dig in and go back and review your changes that have taken place and actually look at the diff and the setting files and all that. A couple important FTP fixes, which hopefully will help people with FTP, although it's still, FTP is always going to be kind of a headache, but there was a NAT fix which should help make FTP flow a little bit easier. And a whole lot of other improvements that I won't go into, but there's just a ton of stuff in 11.2. It's one of our biggest releases ever, probably. I'm really hoping people will love the new reports. Let me give a second to read through all the questions. Is it VMware or dedicated hardware that's recommended? You can use either. The thing with Untangle is that it has to be installed in line. So the challenge with installing a VMware is that you still have to stick it in line with your network. Traffic still has to go through it. But essentially, Untangle's agnostic with what hardware it's installed on. If you install on good enough hardware, it's going to work. VMware comes with some extra complications. You really have to understand VMware and understand virtual networking and make sure it's installed properly. But other than that, it's more or less the same. I'm reading through all the other questions.
There are just some questions about upgrading from version 9 to the current version.
There is no upgrade from 9.x. It is a new install. You will need to reinstall and reconfigure. I would recommend you do that sometime soon.
And we are having a tech talks next week that John Coffin, our director of QA, will be going through an upgrade process from 9 to 11 to this current version. So if you still haven't upgraded, you can join that webinar. That's next week. It's on our website if you want to register.
Yep, and they'll walk you through kind of the details of how easiest to upgrade from 9.0 to 11. Basically, you install a new one, then you transfer the licenses over. Configuration is not as hard. I know it seems like a lot of work. It's not as hard as you would guess. So we would suggest you get to that as soon as you can, as soon as makes sense for your clients or for yourself. And again, we'll go more into reports in a separate webinar. There's a lot more to it. I only showed you like 3 or 4 reports. There's like 250 of them in the new reports. But we'll go more into that, how to craft custom report entries and things like that in a separate webinar. So if you have any questions about that or just want to learn more about it, you can join that, or you can contact us at support. Also, the docs have been completely updated, so the docs are pretty up to date with how the new reporting works. Obviously, this is a new thing, so we'll see what people struggle with and what people don't understand and continue to update that over time. Also, you can jump on the forums and we'll help you as much as we can. Okay, great. Well, I know there are a lot of questions. Again, please reach out to us if we didn't get to your question. But I think we're running low on time, so I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. We're really excited about this one to get it out to you. Please give us your feedback. We would love to hear what you think of it. And again, it'll be coming in the coming weeks. The upgrades should be available to your existing server. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.